For the past 4 months, Isabella had been consumed by a high-pressure assignment. Though it wasn't her personal brainchild, she led the project, and with that came immense responsibility. Its outcome carried serious consequences not just for her own professional standing, but for the future of Smart Corporation as a whole. If things went south, the company might not recover. With a bachelor's degree from Princeton University and a later earned MBA, Isabella had always stood out as the most intelligent member of our family. She had the credentials, the drive, and the intellect to back it all up. My own path was different. Right after high school, I jumped into the workforce as an auto mechanic and stayed in that trade for over 2 decades, 21 years, to be exact. It was an honest job that I genuinely enjoyed. It paid enough to get us through the rough patches, fund Isabella's college education, and raise our 2 kids. We never lived extravagantly, but we were secure and content. We got married at 18, and within 3 months, Isabella found out she was pregnant. The early days were far from easy. We moved in with my parents, whose spacious house provided room for us and an unexpected advantage. With 4 of my siblings already out on their own, there was ample support when it came to watching the baby. It allowed Isabella to juggle her classes and parenting without burning out. Her journey through college took 6 years instead of the typical 4. Balancing motherhood and academic life wasn't easy, but she pulled it off. Meanwhile, I put in long hours and grabbed any overtime available to keep us afloat financially. After she finally graduated from Princeton, we moved into our own place for the first time. Isabella received offers from top firms across the country, but most required relocation. I would have gone if she asked, but she wanted to stay near home. That's how she ended up choosing Smart Corporation. The job came with a solid paycheck and, more importantly to her, clear potential for advancement. She poured herself into the work, always pushing herself to achieve more. Her upcoming presentation, scheduled for Thursday, was set to take place at the Plaza Hotel in Philadelphia, a prestigious venue. I cleared my schedule and took a few days off work, hoping to support her in any way I could. Honestly, the most I could offer was making sure she had warm meals waiting after long days. I never fully grasped the complexity of her work, nor did I try. That world, high-stakes corporate dealings and international business, just never interested me. Executives from Europe, Asia, and South America were flying in for the event. The company was covering their travel and accommodation, even though, based on Isabella's comments, Smart Corporation was already stretched financially. The whole thing felt risky. Her performance on Thursday would have a huge impact, not just for her, but for more than 200 employees who depended on the company's stability. Up until Tuesday night, everything appeared to be going smoothly. That evening, Isabella walked through the door in a sleek gray business suit paired with a crisp white blouse. She set her belongings neatly across the guest room bed. She'd never been one to obsess over tidiness at home, but when it came to work, she operated like a machine, precise, methodical, and thorough. Among the items she laid out were a few cocktail dresses, meant for evening events around the conference. Then I saw something that made my chest tighten. There, tucked among her clothing, were several brightly colored sets of underwear, ones I had never seen before. It was tempting to ask about them, but doing so meant admitting that I had rifled through her things. I didn't want to admit that, even to myself. She eventually emerged from the shower and got into bed. I waited 10 minutes, then joined her, but rest never came. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, every detail repeated in my thoughts like an echo chamber. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained and uneasy. I went for a long walk, hoping fresh air would help me shake off the anxiety. It didn't. If anything, it made the unease settle deeper. Our son, Henry, was stationed with the Navy down in Texas. Evelyn, our daughter, had recently moved to Los Angeles with her husband. It was just Isabella and me now. I missed our kids, but I was also eager for this new chapter, just the 2 of us growing old together. Isabella had been the only woman I'd ever loved. But now it felt like something was crumbling beneath my feet. If she was hiding something, she'd hidden it flawlessly. I'd never snooped through her emails or calls before, I had always trusted her, without question. When I returned home, she was already in the kitchen. She looked up from the stove and said, "Where've you been all morning? You want some eggs or anything?" I shook my head. "No, just coffee." She eyed me for a moment and asked gently, "Everything okay? It's just a 3-day trip. You can come if you want, but I promise you'll be bored stiff." "I don't want to go," I said. "But I hate being here alone. I worry when you're not around." She gave me a soft smile and replied, "That's sweet of you, really. But I'll mostly be at the hotel prepping for tomorrow. Today's for getting the conference room ready and meeting a few clients. By tomorrow, I won't even have a second to catch my breath." Then she leaned in and added, "I'll be back as early as I can on Friday. And I promise we'll have an amazing weekend, you know what I mean." Her tone was meant to soothe, and her words were intended as reassurance. But they didn't work. I looked at her and said, "You can't blame me for being worried. I'm just a guy who fixes cars. You're this accomplished, stunning woman with a big-time career. Sometimes, it feels like what you do matters more than who we are as a family." "Stop it," she snapped suddenly. "I've always respected your work. You raised 2 amazing kids and helped me get through college. You've been a wonderful husband, an incredible father, and you've provided for our family all this time. Don't ever forget that." I sat in silence, finishing the last sip of my coffee while she cleared the breakfast table. "Should I call you while you're there?" I asked. "That might not be a good idea," she replied, shaking her head. "I'll have my phone off most of the time, and I'm going to unplug the hotel room phone at night so I can actually get some rest. But I'll reach out when I can." I walked out to help her pack up the car. As usual, she moved with complete focus, double-checking every item as she loaded it into the trunk of her Audi. It would take her about 1.5 hours to get to the Plaza Hotel. I stood on the porch and watched her drive away, still unable to bring myself to ask about the pills I'd seen earlier. The rest of the morning passed in a fog. I sat there, unease wrapping tightly around me. Everything suddenly felt uncertain. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was in over my head, a guy from a small town who turned wrenches for a living, while my wife was out there conquering boardrooms. Had I been blind all these years? Were there signs I had just refused to see? Just as I was finishing getting dressed, the landline rang. I picked it up to hear Isabella's voice. "Hey, sweetheart," she said brightly. "Just wanted you to know I made it. The drive wasn't bad, traffic moved smoothly." Her voice sounded relaxed and upbeat, like nothing was wrong. "I'll give you a call tonight," she added. "Okay," I answered. "If you need anything, I'll be either at my parents' or at my brother's place." "I'm in room 714, she said casually. "You can reach me on my cell if it's urgent." "Love you," I said, but all I got in response was the click of the phone disconnecting. I didn't head straight to the hotel after that. Instead, I drove around for a bit and stopped to grab a steak and cheese sandwich. Something told me it was going to be a long evening. Once I arrived at the hotel, I parked in the underground garage and stayed in the car for a while, not sure what to do next. My phone buzzed just as I was deciding whether to go inside. "Robby," Isabella said, "everything's in order. I'm heading downstairs now to meet some people for dinner." "You sure you didn't forget anything?" I asked. "No, everything's set up in my room for tomorrow," she assured me. "Need me to bring you anything?" She sighed. "No, Robby. Just relax." "I will," I said with a half laugh. "Have fun." "It's not fun, Robby. It's work." Then silence. Inside the hotel, I blended in easily. The place was crowded, the restaurant and conference areas were buzzing, which gave me the freedom to move around unnoticed. I grabbed a brochure with the hotel's room layout and began wandering. I didn't have a plan. I wasn't even sure what I would do if I ran into Isabella. I figured I'd cross that bridge when I got to it. On one of the information boards, I found a list of rooms reserved for company events. Strangely, there was no mention of Smart Corporation hosting anything that evening. That caught me off guard. Isabella had been firm about staying inside the hotel the entire time, yet here I was, already doubting her words. I started with the casual dining room. It didn't take long to confirm she wasn't there, 5 minutes at most. Next, I checked the fine dining lounge. It was quiet and dimly lit, with booths offering plenty of privacy. That's when I saw her. Isabella was seated in a booth tucked in the corner. She was wearing a form-fitting black cocktail dress with a deep neckline and a string of pearls that caught the candlelight. She looked radiant. The group at her table seemed captivated, especially the man sitting beside her. I recognized a few of her co-workers, but this man stood out. He wasn't one of them. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. The restaurant wasn't packed, so it was easy for me to take a seat a few tables away. The small candle at my table flickered too close to my face, so I waved down the waiter. "Mind blowing this out? It's bothering my glaucoma," I said. The waiter obliged. I ordered my usual, a chicken dish, and tried to act casual. When he refilled my coffee for the third time, I leaned in and asked, "Hey, that guy across from me, he looks familiar. You know who he is?" The waiter glanced over. "Oh yeah, that's Christian Carter. He's part of the local town meeting. People say he's going to run for Congress soon. Is that his wife with him? She's stunning." "No, first time I've seen her," I replied. The waiter gave a knowing smile. "He always books that booth for special ladies, if you catch my drift." I nodded politely and asked for the check. Watching them, I noticed something I had never seen before in Isabella. The way she listened to him, leaned toward him, laughed at every word, it was more than admiration. She looked enchanted. The chemistry was obvious. Nothing overt happened, no touching or kissing, but the mood was unmistakably intimate. This wasn't business. This wasn't professional. By the time I left the restaurant, they were finishing their second bottle of wine. That's when it all clicked. The expensive lingerie she had packed, the secrecy, the distance. I tucked myself away in a corner of the hotel lobby, hidden from sight. 10 minutes later, the two of them exited the restaurant. Isabella was holding his hand as they walked across the lobby toward the elevator. I kept my eyes on the panel above the elevator, watching the numbers climb. When it stopped at the third floor, a small sense of hope stirred in my chest. At least she didn't take him to her room, but when the elevator didn't stop at the 7th floor, that flicker of hope vanished. She had gone to his room. I stayed in the lobby, watching the elevator for over an hour. People came and went, businessmen, tourists, couples laughing their way to rooms, but Isabella wasn't one of them. Eventually, I retrieved the empty suitcase from my trunk and approached the front desk. Even though I could prove I was her husband, it wasn't easy to get a keycard. Only after a call to her room went unanswered did they finally hand one over. Room 714. I didn't turn on the lights when I entered. I just sat in the dark, listening, waiting, making sure she wouldn't come back too soon. An hour passed before I moved. Quietly, methodically, I packed everything she brought, clothes, shoes, makeup, all of it. I left nothing behind. On the dresser, her work materials were arranged like a still life. 24 custom promotional folders, 20 regular ones, her laptop, a digital projector, the entire presentation that was supposed to save her company. I packed them all. I took her purse and phone, too. She only had a small clutch with her, probably just a tube of lipstick inside. Once I was sure I had everything, I placed 2 items on the dresser, her car keys and my wedding ring. That was all. The rest of the room was empty. The elevator took me down to the garage. I loaded both suitcases into the trunk, and 20 minutes later, I was on the expressway heading north. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. Robby?" "Yes," I said. "Where are you?" she asked quietly. "I'll be at the house soon," I replied. That was it. Silence filled the line. I could almost hear her trying to figure out what to say. Salesmen say the first one to speak loses, and that pause stretched forever. "I'm sorry," she finally said. No questions. No excuses. She hung up. I turned my phone off. She had returned to her room, probably seen the emptiness, the missing items, the ring. She knew what I had done. Later that day, she was supposed to deliver a presentation that might have saved Smart Corp, maybe even earned her a promotion. Now, all of it was sitting in the attic of my garage. By that point, I wasn't even sure if it mattered anymore. I gathered up my clothes and essentials, everything I needed. As soon as the banks opened, I closed every account and withdrew the cash. Enough to live quietly for a few years. I'd still need work eventually, but I was ready for that. I spent a few hours wandering through Luray Caverns. Rented a room near Wadeville. It felt like being nowhere, and that was exactly what I wanted. On Sunday, I called Evelyn. She already knew. Isabella had confessed. She cheated. I found out, I left, and she lost her job. That was the whole story. Evelyn didn't defend her. And honestly, I felt bad. But not that bad. Actions have consequences. By Monday noon, I had a job. Handymen are always in demand. A couple of months later, Evelyn called. Isabella had moved in with her parents. Henry called from Texas too. He never said a bad word about his mother, and I respected that. It wasn't his job to pick sides. And that was it. No movie moment. No big dramatic ending. Just the slow, quiet forward motion of life. Eventually, things settled into a rhythm. I kept in touch with Evelyn every week. Henry and I started emailing more often. Evelyn still talked to Isabella, but didn't tell me much. I didn't ask. Neither of us ever filed for divorce. I got a Tennessee driver's license. Started going to a local bar once or twice a month. I dated 2 women, off and on. No commitments. That suited us all just fine. That was a long time ago. Eventually, I stopped thinking about Isabella at all. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. By the following Tuesday, less than a week after I'd disappeared with Isabella's conference materials, she had transformed from the calm, calculated professional I'd known for decades into a woman on the warpath. I knew it would happen, planned for it, in fact. I hadn't just taken her presentation gear out of spite. No, it was strategic. I wanted her to feel the pressure of her double life folding in on itself, in real time, at the very moment she'd intended to stand on a stage and lie through a dazzling smile to a room full of foreign investors. The same stage she'd walked onto after walking out of another man's hotel room the night before. By the time I was loading a truck in Tennessee and trying to forget her name, she was tearing through corporate corridors in Philadelphia like a hurricane in heels. When she returned to the company's headquarters, they weren't as welcoming as she probably expected. Word of her no-show presentation had already reached upper management. Apparently, when the 24 branded folders, digital projector, and laptop vanished, she had to improvise using a borrowed laptop and a broken-down PowerPoint that looked nothing like what had been approved by the board. Half the audience left before she hit the 5th slide. But the real storm began after that. First came the panicked phone calls to Evelyn, followed by increasingly aggressive voicemails to my old number. I had long since shut off that phone and tossed the SIM into a storm drain. I knew better than to leave a digital trail. She contacted old friends. Reached out to Henry on base. She even messaged a few of my former co-workers at the garage, trying to sniff out my location. None of them knew anything, and if they did, they weren't talking. I kept my circle tight, small, and quiet. No forwarding address. No return labels. I paid everything in cash. The life of a man who'd vanished on his own terms. A week later, Evelyn gave me the heads up. Isabella had gone full scorched earth. She was telling anyone who'd listened that I had stolen company property, classified documents, intellectual property, even trade secrets. She claimed she was working on a patent-pending design for a software interface, which I knew for a fact was just a fluff piece she'd been using to stretch out her project timeline. She said the missing laptop contained confidential client information. That the folders held signed NDAs and market projections not yet released to shareholders. She was threatening a criminal case, grand larceny, theft of trade secrets, and even fraud, claiming I had impersonated someone to get access to the room. Her lawyer fired off cease and desist letters like confetti at a New Year's party. But I wasn't worried. See, months before this all came to a head, I'd started scanning everything Isabella left lying around. I never opened her emails or read her texts. Back then, I hadn't needed to. But I did notice the invoices, the project logs, the notes she left in the margins of her day planner. And I made digital copies. I burned them to thumb drives and stored them in separate lockboxes across 3 states. I'd watched enough true crime to know how this stuff played out. All that confidential information? It was already floating around in semi-public domain databases, from her college portfolio to her LinkedIn updates. Nothing she worked on was remotely original. The proprietary software she claimed I stole was actually open source, modified by interns, and repackaged under a new name. I had every receipt, every technical file, and every timestamp to prove it. Still, her threats escalated. She filed a police report in Philadelphia, which fizzled out as soon as the officer realized it was a domestic dispute masquerading as corporate espionage. Then she filed another one in our hometown, hoping the local PD would side with the golden girl of Smart Corporation, but the officer she spoke to had been in my shop just months before, getting his brakes replaced. He knew me. He listened, took notes, then dropped the report into a drawer it would never leave. And when she tried to involve corporate attorneys, that's when she really made her mistake. Because Smart Corporation was already in freefall from the presentation disaster. Their investors pulled out. Stocks dipped. Rumors spread that they'd falsified parts of their quarterly earnings. A week after her failed pitch, 2 of her supervisors resigned. HR launched an internal audit, and guess whose name was all over every questionable document? Not mine. Isabella's. Her attempt to paint me as the villain only highlighted her own negligence. It turned out, in her rush to get ahead, she'd signed off on reports she hadn't even read. I hadn't destroyed her career. I'd just exposed what was already rotting underneath it. Evelyn kept me updated in bits and pieces. Isabella was bouncing between her parents' house and random motels. Her LinkedIn profile vanished. Smart Corporation scrubbed her from their site. She made noise about filing a civil suit, but no lawyer wanted to touch it. Too messy. Too personal. Too likely to implode in court. The part that stuck with me most, though, was what Evelyn said in passing, that Isabella was furious not just because I had left, or because I had taken her things, but because I had left nothing behind for her to control. No note. No fight. No tears. Just absence. She thought I would break. She never imagined I would disappear so cleanly, so quietly, with her entire professional identity in a suitcase. Now, nearly a year has passed. I'm still in Tennessee. I fix things, sinks, fences, broken doors. I live small and peaceful, a life that doesn't require resumes or quarterly reviews. I drink coffee in the mornings and sleep well at night. The suitcases are still in the garage attic, untouched. I haven't looked inside since the day I carried them up the stairs. Isabella's name rarely comes up now. Evelyn keeps her distance, and Henry checks in regularly. My story didn't end with revenge or redemption. There was no grand courtroom showdown, no headline-making confession. Just one man stepping away from a life that had become a lie, and leaving the liar to deal with the ruins she created. And just like that, I stopped thinking about Isabella. I never expected to hear from Henry again so soon, especially not in the middle of a rainstorm, and especially not with the kind of voice you can only carry when something's weighing heavy on your chest. It was the end of summer when he showed up in person, his uniform jacket soaked through, face pale like he hadn't slept in days. I hadn't seen my son in over a year, not since before everything unraveled with Isabella. We kept in touch, sure, but this wasn't a visit born out of homesickness. He stood at the edge of the porch like someone who wasn't sure if he was delivering news or asking for help. That was the moment everything started shifting again, just when I thought life had finally gone still. It turned out Isabella hadn't just lost her job, She lost something far more dangerous: access. When Smart Corp imploded, they locked out all former employees from internal systems, including a shared cloud database where proprietary files and investor decks were stored. Isabella had told her new contacts, some wealthy European interests who'd been circling her like vultures since before the conference, that she still had access to those files. What she didn't tell them was that her golden folder, the real one, had gone with me. But she'd made promises. And not the kind you walk back from. Henry learned all this by accident, or so he claimed. He'd overheard a call between Isabella and someone with a thick accent while visiting her unannounced. She was agitated, pacing in her parents' backyard, chain-smoking, something she hadn't done in years. He said she kept referencing the backup and the man who took everything like she was planning something. He didn't think much of it at first until she mentioned that she was flying to Atlanta to meet someone who could get results. That's when Henry got spooked. And rightly so. Because that folder I took, the one full of pristine Smart Corp materials, it wasn't just binders and printouts. It contained a thumb drive. A very specific one with metadata that I hadn't even noticed until months later. Embedded within the slides and financial projections were encrypted modules that weren't visible on regular file previews. At first, I thought it was leftover tech fluff, internal benchmarking scripts, maybe. But when I eventually scanned it through an offline laptop I bought at a pawn shop, I saw the truth. The drive was bait. It wasn't meant to be used for presentations. It was meant to be planted. Hidden in plain sight. It ran tracking scripts and data siphons, malware, essentially. Whoever inserted it into the company's system had done so with incredible subtlety, but it had breadcrumbs leading back to an IP address registered in Zurich. Which was strange, considering Smart Corp had no offices in Switzerland. I didn't tell anyone about that. Not even Henry. But now, with him standing in front of me, telling me his mother was poking international business interests and possibly putting her son in the crosshairs, I knew I had waited too long. It didn't stop there. A week later, I received a letter. Not an email. A physical envelope, no return address, postmarked from Richmond. Inside was a single printed photo of the thumb drive I'd hidden in my attic. It had been photographed on a red velvet cloth under harsh lighting, like someone was cataloging it for auction or analysis. That wasn't the worst part. Underneath the image were coordinates, latitude and longitude, and a time. It was a message. A meeting request. Someone knew what I had. And they wanted it back. The smart thing would have been to burn everything, toss the drive in a river, and vanish again. But something in me had hardened since the hotel. I'd spent so many years thinking of myself as a background character in other people's stories, Isabella's, my kids, even the town's. But standing in my garage with that envelope in hand, I realized something had shifted. I had become the final link in a chain of dirty deals and broken promises. And for once, I wasn't the one scrambling. I drove to the coordinates. A truck stopped just outside Roanoke, and parked where I could see everything but not be seen. I didn't bring the real thumb drive. Just a decoy, loaded with ancient PowerPoint files and a few harmless scripts to make it look legit. I waited until the exact minute listed on the paper, and sure enough, a black SUV pulled in, windows tinted, engine running. 2 men we got out. Not goons, not muscle. Suits. Clean cut. One was American. The other European, tall with a scar above his brow like someone who'd grown up in a place where people still earned their money with knives. They didn't look around. They knew I was watching. The American pulled out a phone, held it to his ear, and scanned a lot. When I didn't show, they left. I didn't need more confirmation. This wasn't about a divorce anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. This was something Isabella had dipped her fingers into, not understanding how deep the well went. And she had no idea what kind of fire she was playing with. That night, I buried the real thumb drive in a pelican case, wrapped in lead foil, 3 feet under the foundation of an abandoned tool shed up in the hills. Then I made a copy, one that couldn't be traced, and mailed it anonymously to a journalist I used to read back when I still believed in the news. I included the original SmartCorp memo about the presentation, the metadata logs, and a timeline of Isabella's descent into international freelancing. I didn't sign it. Then I went back to work fixing porch steps and hanging drywall. A month later, the story broke. Not about Isabella. Not directly. But about a multinational shell company suspected of laundering sensitive corporate data through mid-level American tech firms. SmartCorp was named, buried deep in the article, almost as a footnote. But it was there. And I knew someone, somewhere, had opened the envelope. That was when Isabella vanished from all contact. Evelyn stopped mentioning her. Henry didn't ask questions. And I never got another envelope. But I did start sleeping with a lock on my bedroom door. Just in case.